Hey everyone, if you have more than half a brain cell, I'm assuming that you clicked on this video to see my scrap stuff from Restoration. Before you go asking in the comments, yes, I did leave Restoration. I left for my own reasons. You can ask whatever questions you want in the comments about the mod, I don't really care. But yeah, this is the video that will be showing off everything that I've done for Restoration, including charts, gameplay. Obviously, I won't be including all gameplay because some of it I'm not supposed to show you, but I did show snippets anyways. But yeah, that'll be this video. Before I begin, I would like to thank all my friends who have been supporting me through leaving Restoration. It's mostly been my IRL friends, but also some people like Rafa, Raimbow, and Sulo and Kophy. Those guys have also been helping me. They've been just letting me do my own thing pretty much. But yeah, with all the recent stuff happening, me and Kofi decided, yeah, right now probably seems about the right time to leave. And like I said before, it's been in the making for a while, so it just seemed like the opportunity. Anyways, I won't really waste any more of your time. Pretty much how this video will be structured, I will have two different segments. One where I talk about the stuff that I worked on in Restoration, and then the other segment will just be the gameplay clips that I have. And every now and again, I'll put a gameplay clip while I'm talking about it, if it just fits. But I'll have the full clip later in the video, and they will be individually uploaded on my channel as well. So if you want to look at anything in particular, or you just want to skip my yapping, you can go for that. But anyways, enjoy the video. Oh yeah, by the way, little side tangent, or whatever you want to call this. Originally, this video was supposed to have me commenting on like everything that I did, but I decided, that would be too long of a video, and I only have like 20 minutes to record this anyways, so you'll get what you get. Anyways, yeah. So to start off, I will be going over my charts, those being Bloody Stream, Cycles Encore, Fighter Flight, the old version of Frenzy, Lucas World, Melting, Reunion, Soured, Old, Too Far Alt, Normal Too Far, Universal Collapse, and a bunch of others. Those are just the ones that I didn't code for, so I thought I'd just cover those real quick. Melting, I had to win a game of rock, paper, scissors for, so that one was a pretty interesting way. It was like one of my first charts, I think, but I think it was like my third. Yeah, it was around there. It was when I first joined the team. Yeah, that one was definitely a weird way to get the chart, but hey, I won. You can use it. I don't really care. You can use any of my stuff. I don't really give a shit. Let's see. Fight or Flight, I did a collab with Kai. I can't really show off the whole thing because the song hasn't been released yet, so there's just a little bit of scrapped gameplay there, probably, in the video. I don't know. Figure that out when I'm editing this thing. Let's see, Universal Collapse. There's like 10 different charts for that song, and all of them were ass. There was like one good chart, but then the guy, I think it was L4 who made it. We don't really talk about him anymore. There was some drama with him, so I decided, I'll just do the chart myself. And there you go. Soured Old, same reason, except it didn't have 50 charts, it only had one. Reunion, I did the old version of Reunion as well, but I didn't include that because I don't have the old version anymore. I'm sure somebody's uploaded the gameplay somewhere, you could just look around for that. Rest of them, they were just kind of charts that I did. Frenzy Old was one of my first charts as well. I think it was like my fourth one. I don't remember the number. There's that one. I didn't really care about it as much, but it's a good song anyway. All the songs that I chart I think are good songs. Sorry about my mouse click. But yeah, nothing really much else that sticks out. I have charted a bunch of other songs, but obviously those I coded, and I'll put that in a different section. So I'll just roll whatever gameplay I have, and we'll move on to the next one.
friend Sonic the Hedgehog. Alright, radical. Man, we sure have had some great adventures together over the years, haven't we? Remember that time we went to Green Hill Zone and stopped the evil Dr. Eggman? Oh, so cool.
Lemon!
This is what happens when you try to play God.
Это... Лукас! Это Лукас!
Сам ты, Лукас. Шел.
Ну блин. So for things that I coded, I did a lot of songs and a lot of backend work, such as like the launcher, some of the shaders, a bunch of that kind of stuff, you know. I'm not really going to go over that because nobody really cares about that. But I will go over some of the more notable songs. Let me go through the list. We'll start off with Educator. Originally, there was supposed to be a mini game for Educator. Might bring that idea back someday. It's probably going to be scrapped in Restoration unless I finish it. Which, speaking of minigames, there's supposed to be a Prey minigame. We decided to take that and turn it into a different mod. If there's any noise in the background, that's my mom. Yeah, we're taking the Prey minigame. We're going to make our own little mini mod out of that. The people in Restoration, they can use any code or stuff from that mod whenever we get that started. Esta guy's letting us use their assets. We're going to be making our own starved, finishing whatever assets that weren't finished, which is mostly Sonic. Furnace is basically done. It just needs animations for some other stuff in Prey. Fight or Flight won't be in that mod. Might just rip it from normal Sonic.EXE. I don't fucking know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, we're not. It'll just be for Prey, just so that concept doesn't just go to waste, because I really want to see that done. Other songs I'll finish. Endless Encore I'll finish. Probably gonna redo the chart, because it was by Cherri. I don't want to use her chart. I want to make my own. I used to have my own, but we don't talk about who I made that with. I'll make my own chart. We'll make that a mod. It'll be used in Restoration as well. I don't care if they use it. Pretty much whatever song I'm doing, I'm gonna make it its own separate mod, and then other people in Restoration, they can use it. I don't care, as I said. Let's see. Educator, going back to Educator. I was supposed to code Expulsion and Exuberant. I did chart both of those songs. Never ended up finishing coding them, so you'll just see some little snippets that I had, or just whatever gameplay footage I recorded when I did the recordings for the videos. I'm recording this audio like a week after I did the video stuff. I don't remember what I recorded. I just have a list of videos. Anyways, let's see. Fake Baby. I was supposed to code that. Never did. Assets were never finished. Then Zol left the mod, so they weren't going to be finished anyways. It's a shame that I had a lot of cool ideas with Fake Baby. Me and Kophy charted it as well, as I said. I think I forget stuff really quickly, just bear with me. Let's see, other songs. I coded the Curse Week. That would have been cool to finish, but it never did. I also charted Malediction. I really liked that song. I don't know why. I just think it's a really good song. Let's see. I originally charted Unblessful Hedgehog, but there was some stuff about that I don't want to get into. But maybe someday we can finish Curse. I still like Esta guy's concepts that he has, and the extricate hex is practically done. It just needs some background stuff. Let's see. Faker. I had a lot of fun doing that. I got to learn how shaders work. Well, at least the lighting system, which isn't used in Faker, unfortunately. Well, I decided not to use it because I couldn't get the right colors down for Faker. But Faker is basically done. All it needs is boyfriend sprites and the ending transformation to be added. But since Traino left the mod and the devs are planning to replace a bunch of his stuff, I don't know if it's still going to be used. But I did the code for that along with Raimbow. He did a bunch of camera stuff, so... Well, he didn't do a lot of camera stuff, he just added some in. So you'll see that. Let's see, Forestall Desire. I was supposed to do the mechanics, and I think you can see a demo of it in the video. I don't remember what build I recorded that on. It's in the old coded build, because the recode doesn't have it. But yeah, you'll see that. I charted it as well, because Cherri's chart fucking sucked ass. No offense to you, unless you take offense. It doesn't matter. Let's see, Found You. I had a lot of fun with Found You. I learned how to do shaders better in Found You, better than the lighting system. I also coded practically the entire thing. Rainbow did camera stuff because I asked him to, so you'll see that. Found You also. It helped me add in like HX stages to the recode build, which made that a shit ton easier. It would have been hell to do that in Lua. But Found You isn't fully done. I still had a bunch of ideas to add into Found You, but never got to it because I left. And the fucking ending transformation that Luke was supposed to do was never finished. That was great, but it's basically done, so I'll show you that. Christmas week, first week I've ever coded for Restoration, and that's what let me get into Restoration. It's very ass right now, because it's old as shit, but you'll see that. I charted all those songs as well. Oh yeah, I charted Found You with Kophy as well, by the way. Yeah, nothing much to say about the Christmas week. Needlematic, I just did a port of it, and I charted the first half of it. So nothing much to say there. Nostalgic Duo, I had a bunch of ideas with, but it's very, very buggy, and never finished it. So I think I charted part of it. I don't remember, but yeah, I had a lot of ideas with that. Never really put them to use, but maybe I'll finish it someday. Probably not, but it's whatever. Let's see. Perdition, I did the background for. Then Sonic.EXE fixed it up because that was the second thing that I've ever coded, and it was complete dog shit. But thank you, Sonic.EXE, for fixing it up. Yeah, I never really cared about it though. I just did it because I wanted to get into the source code. Let's see. And that was the only thing that they had for me. Next thing would be, well, I've already talked about the Prey minigame. Basically, the concept with Prey was that you were supposed to play it through like a Sonic CD level, but obviously never finished it. But it'll be in its own mod with Prey Good Future, so look forward to that someday. It just depends on when I start working on it. Me and Kophy and Esta guy already have some plans with it. Kophy made most of the plans, and I just went through them. Well, not really plans, he just set up the server and we'll be doing other stuff. Little side note with Sleigh Bells, during the reference parts of Cycles and Black Sun, you were supposed to see the background of each respective character, but that obviously never happened. Mistletoe was supposed to have a 3D section, I think, but the 3D artist left, so they're probably not doing that anymore. Jingle Hells was supposed to have more stuff. I don't know what other stuff, but it was never finished, sadly. Let's see. Substantial, I only did the ending part with the cloud shit. So, yeah, not really much to say there. Let's see. Sunshine Encore, I charted. Well, I charted the second half. That was about it. I also added Exterion to the background because he was a bit bugged. I think he still is bugged because he's not supposed to appear at certain parts, but not my problem anymore. Sharpie Showdown, I did the background for. I was supposed to finish it, but never did. Yeah, kind of got lazy with that one. So I'll just see whatever progress I had. Let's see, Thunderbolt, I just ripped the code from a, what's it called, Shocker, and adapted it to it. There was supposed to be more shit with Thunderbolt, but never got to that, so don't really care about it. Let's see, Tuso Encore and Alt, I just did the icon stuff, the icon animation that you'll see. Yeah, not really much to say about that. It's not even in the recode, so it's whatever. Triple Trouble Encore, I think that recording's in the recode build. I added the ring note. It's not really done. It's just there so that the chart doesn't fucking die. But yeah, I also charted the first half from Tails to Knuckles. Cherri probably would have burst into flames if she had to chart the first or the entire song. But me and Kophy were also supposed to code the rest of Triple Trouble Encore, but the assets weren't ever finished, and obviously we left, so yeah, never got to that. Sorry guys. This is actually scrapped, but I felt like I should include the gameplay anyways because I already posted a teaser of it, and this is just the old version of Uh-Oh. But yeah, you'll get to see what that looks like. And that's about it. Critical Error, I just did some note shit and fixed it up a little bit because of the new one that was made. Let's see. What about these ones? No. Nothing in there. Alright, yeah, that's about it. As I said, I did a bunch of back-end stuff, but I'm not really going to show that off because I don't feel like doing that, and I only have 4 minutes left to record this. But anyways, enjoy the rest of the video. I'll post each of these videos separately as their own little gameplay thing on my channel if you just want to watch that specific video, or you can just watch the entire one of this. you could do whatever. I don't care. But yeah, I'll leave you to it and enjoy the gameplays. Yeah, see you guys.
And you're going to play my shotcut. I'm Sonic. What the
bucket of bullshit will lay up and match you this time around. Hey, redhead, you might want to repair your toys.